Welcome back. China has summoned U.S. ambassador in protest after President Donald Trump approved a law backing anti-government protesters in Hong Kong. China's foreign ministry said the U.S. should immediately stop interfering in its internal affairs. In a statement, China's foreign ministry said the U.S. would bear the consequences for acting arbitrarily on Hong Kong. Foreign Minister Wang Yi said the new U.S. law slanders China to a legislation close to madness. Wang said the Congress' repeated enactment of laws against Beijing have seriously poisoned relations between both the countries. Hong Kong's government said the U.S. law sent the wrong message to protesters and clearly interfered with the city's affairs. For more on this developing story, we are joined live from our Beijing correspondent, Patrick Falk. Hello, Patrick Falk. So what reaction has there been from China on the passage of these two bills?
Well, you touched on some of it just a moment ago. A while ago, the foreign ministry, as you can imagine, criticized the move by the U.S. and warned, as you say, there would be consequences if the U.S. continued to act arbitrarily over Hong Kong. In particular, it said that the passage of the bill was a gross violation of China's internal affairs. It also said that it was a gross violation of international law governing the norms of international relations. And it also said that this was an example of the U.S. Acting with hegemony, imposing its hegemony over other countries. Now, the Global Times, Chinese media, the state mouthpiece Global Times, also quoted an analyst, and you touched on this a moment ago as well, suggesting that this would encourage rioters and violent acts, and said that it essentially gives umbrella protection to people who are anti-Chinese. The Hong Kong government this morning also issued its response. It said that it would react pragmatically to the developments, which perhaps mean that it doesn't intend to take any steps to retaliate at this time, although there have been concerns that American businesses might be impacted by this. American businesses in Hong Kong in particular, that is. But for the time being, you have to remember that the passage of the bill doesn't necessarily change anything. This is the Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act in particular, rather than the legislation which prevents the exports of tear gas and rubber bullets and so on and so forth. With regards to the Human Rights and Democracy Act, it would still require the US to review and revoke Hong Kong's special trade status, and for sanctions to be imposed on officials deemed to be responsible for curtailing Hong Kong's freedoms before anything necessarily changes. So for the time being, Hong Kong, as it says, will be looking after its best interests.
Falk, as you said, that China has been vocal in warning the U.S. not to go ahead with this. Do you think Beijing might have been taken by surprise by it by any chance?
Well, perhaps you could say that, given that it had protested quite sternly about this move. And you mentioned a while ago that on Monday that the foreign ministry had summoned the U.S. ambassador Terry Branstad and given lodged stern complaints about the potential passage of the bill. But remember, the bill was passed almost unanimously by Congress and the Senate. In fact, there was only one vote against in the House, which means that even if President Trump wanted to veto the bill, he wouldn't have been able to do so necessarily, because it would have been overridden by that a huge majority and that huge support for the passage of the Human Rights and Democracy Act in particular. There are indications, though, that the president may have been reluctant to go through with it, though. He did say after signing it into law that he was doing it out of respect for President Xi and the people of Hong Kong. And of course, he will have the ongoing trade negotiations on the top of his mind. This is something that clearly isn't going to help the situation. And you imagine he might have wanted to avoid doing this if he could have done.
Thank you, Patrick, our correspondent, for talking to us live from Beijing. We now move on to Iraq, where a group of anti-government protesters have set fire to Iran's consulate in the southern city of Najaf. Demonstrators chanted "Iran out of Iraq" as flames engulfed the building. The protesters broke into the building, but the Iranian staff had already left. It is the second attack on an Iranian consulate in Iraq this month, after the consulate in Karbala was targeted 3 weeks ago. Iraq's foreign ministry has condemned the attack. In a statement, the ministry said such assaults will damage historical ties between Baghdad and Tehran. Deadly protests in Iraq have killed over 350 people in the past 2 months. Post-Soviet security bloc, the CSTO, has pledged to support international efforts to preserve the 2015 Iranian nuclear deal. The Collective Security Treaty Organization comprises Russia, Armenia, Belarus, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Tajikistan. In a statement, the bloc's foreign minister said the nuclear deal should be fulfilled in line with UN Security Council Resolution 2231. Members of the CST organization say they favor step-by-step implementation of commitments under the pact. Meanwhile, Russia's President Vladimir Putin has arrived in Kyrgyzstan capital Bishkek to attend the CSTO summit. Each member's head of state will be at the summit. Arrested at least 8 people allegedly linked to the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency during last week's fuel price unrest. State media reports they received CIA-funded training in various countries to gather information on the recent riots. Earlier, Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei said the nation defeated a foreign conspiracy behind the protests. The Supreme Leader said the unrest was part of a dangerous plot supported by what he called big money. Amnesty International said over 140 people died during the protests, but Tehran said only 5 people lost their lives. In Afghanistan, an IED explosion killed 15 people and wounded 2 others in northern Kunduz province. A government official says 7 women and 6 children are among the dead. The governor of Kunduz said the roadside bomb exploded when it made contact with the vehicle. The victims were traveling to Imam Sahib district to attend a wedding ceremony. Government officials have blamed the Taliban for planting the bomb. Syria's government has blocked the Constitutional Committee meetings in Geneva for a 3rd consecutive day. Speaking to reporters, the committee co-chair Hadi al-Bahra accused the government of stalling. Al-Bahra said Damascus wanted to add an item to the agenda that fell outside the basic framework of the constitution. He said Syrian government officials have also rejected all 3 proposals made by the opposition. Ahmed Kozbari, the committee co-chair representing the Syrian government, said it had wanted to condemn Turkey's operation in northern Syria. The second round of the committee dialogue began on Monday. Amnesty International seeks a review of citizenship laws in India. The head of Amnesty International India, Akar Patel, says the Supreme Court created Foreigners Tribunal is rendering people stateless in Assam. He says the tribunal that decides whether people are citizens is flawed. Patel said people appearing before the tribunals are not given the right of fair trial as enshrined in the Constitution. The rights body said Indian courts have also failed to provide relief to those who were rendered stateless. In August, India stripped nearly 2 million people, mostly Muslims, of citizenship in Assam. Russia is suggesting the New START nuclear arms control treaty with the United States should be extended by 5 years. In a statement, Russia's deputy foreign minister said a shorter extension would not be the best outcome, but would be better than nothing. The New START accord ends in 2021 and is the last major nuclear arms control treaty between Moscow and Washington. It limits the number of strategic nuclear warheads the 2 countries can deploy to 1,550 each. The accord was signed between former US President Barack Obama and his Russian counterpart in 2010. Incoming EU President Ursula von der Leyen says the bloc will not replace NATO as the guarantor of European security. Speaking in Strasbourg, von der Leyen said the EU will never become a military alliance. Her remarks follow French President Emmanuel Macron's statement where he said NATO is brain dead and the EU can no longer rely on it. The bloc has launched a number of initiatives to make its military spending more coherent and efficient. Von der Leyen said the transatlantic alliance would remain responsible for European collective security without any question. The UN High Commissioner for Refugees, Filippo Grandi, is urging Greece to improve living conditions in migrant camps. Over 37,000 people are crammed into the facilities on the eastern Aegean islands, well above their capacity. Greece's new conservative government has taken a tougher stance than its leftist predecessor on the migrant crisis. The government said it will shut the door on people not entitled to stay in the country. The UN refugee chief has called for a collective European solution to protect these migrants.
These living conditions need urgent improvement. We cannot have in Europe people living, whatever the situation of these people, we cannot accept that they live in such miserable living conditions, exposed also to violence and exploitation.
UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson has denied the existence of plans to sell the country's National Health Service to US investors. Earlier, Labour's Jeremy Corbyn presented documents saying access to Britain's state-run health service is being discussed in trade talks with the US. Corbyn said the uncensored papers could lead to the runaway of privatization of the country's health service. But Johnson said he wants a dynamic, flourishing UK economy to allow the government to fund the NHS over the long term.
This is a complete diversion that the NHS under no circumstances will be on the table for negotiation, for sale. Look at what we're doing with the NHS. We're funding it massively. And the reason we can fund it massively is because we believe, as One Nation Conservatives, this is a new government with a new approach. We believe in putting big sums now into the NHS and sustainably for the future. But we also believe in driving the long-term growth of the UK economy.
We're taking a short break. Stay with us. In France, farmers staged a tractor rally to protest against President Emmanuel Macron's anti-farming policies. They blocked the Champs-Élysées Avenue in Paris with bales of straw and obstructed highways leading to the capital. The farmers demanded an immediate lifting of a ban on the weed killer glyphosate. They also protested against vegan activists' attack on livestock farms and butchers' shops. A rare portrait of Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart has sold for €4 million at Christie's in Paris. It rapidly passed the pre-sale estimate of 800,000 to €1.2 million. The work, one of 4 paintings of the composer, was made in 1770. It has been attributed to Italian painter Giambattista Signorelli. The portrait was ordered by Venetian Receiver General Pietro Lugatti some days after an organ concert by Mozart in Verona. An oil-on-canvas portrait depicts a 13-year-old Mozart in a white wig and a red frock coat playing the harpsichord.
What's very interesting about that portrait is the musical score, because it's actually only known from that portrait. So some musicologists have said it could be the work of Mozart himself, who wrote that when he was young and left it behind to the commissioner.
18 years ago, Afghan women could be flogged in the streets if they left the house without a male guardian. Today, the Taliban no longer rule Kabul, yet the country remains as patriarchal as ever. Now some women are fighting back by running their own female-only public transport network. For details, watch this report.
Parisa Hedri is one of the only 4 drivers working for Pink Shuttle, a pilot bus program which ferries women and children across the Afghan capital. I'm interested in my work driving, but sometimes my family does not agree due to security reasons. As you know, once a week or once a month the blasts occur. Nonetheless, we are champions and we are not afraid. There's practically no public transport in Kabul, and women who travel on foot or use the few overcrowded buses that do operate in the city are likely to face sexual harassment. A Toyota minivan full of women does attract a lot of attention, but Pink Shuttle is still the safest option for Afghan women. There are some young boys and men who drive past us very fast and want to somehow frighten us, but we got used to this routine. They have done it so much that I am personally not scared anymore, and it becomes typical for me. US President Donald Trump recently said peace talks with the Taliban are back on track after being called off in September. It remains to be seen how much importance will be given to women's rights as the negotiations resume. The Afghan government has issued 275 driver's licenses to women so far this year.
NATO has awarded a $1 billion contract to Boeing to upgrade its fleet of AWACS surveillance planes. At a press conference, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said the modernization will keep the alliance at the leading edge of technology. He said NATO AWACS have been the eyes in the sky, supporting operations for decades. Boeing President Michelle Arthur said the modernization program means the aircraft will continue to thrive. The upgrade will keep one of the Western Alliance's few joint military assets in service until 2035.
The modernization will ensure NATO remains at the leading edge of technology. It will provide AWACS with sophisticated new communications and networking capabilities, so these aircraft can continue their vital mission and contribute to our security.
Asian stock markets have slipped after US President Donald Trump signed a law backing anti-government protesters in Hong Kong. The law has dampened investors' confidence that a trade deal between the US and China could soon be finalized. The Shanghai Composite is trading nearly 0.5% lower. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index and the Kospi in Seoul have also lost a fraction each. Tokyo's Nikkei 225 is also trading marginally lower, despite 2.5% surge in Panasonic's share prices. The Nikkei Asian Review has reported that Panasonic may sell its semiconductor business to Taiwan's Nuvoton Technology. Now let's look at the weather from around the globe. This is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.